Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite game of all time, Star Wars Armada, and talking about the golden age of Star Wars Armada. It's a question that might not have a definitive answer, but I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on it, and I want to talk about mine and kind of start the discussion and ask you what you think the golden age of Star Wars Armada was. I'm going to run us on a little bit of a timetable, taking us through the waves. I'm not going to talk about every single release, because in addition to different waves and time periods, there were other changes, other individual releases, things like individual ships that released outside of a wave, or technically things like the campaign packs that weren't a wave of in and of themselves. We've also had things like rapid reinforcements and other things like that that were individual releases, but not necessarily a wave. So I'm going to take us through the waves and talk about the highs and the lows and everything in between, and I'll conclude with what I think was the golden age of Star Wars Armada. And I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below on what you think the golden age was and what you think was great about it, and if you agree with me or disagree on any of the points I make in this video. I do love talking about this game. I haven't been talking about it as much lately, as of course the game has kind of sunsetted, but it's still a game that I tend to play from time to time because it is near and dear to my heart and it's loads of fun. Also, if you guys are new here to the channel, I'd love to have you stick around. We're doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my other videos. It's as simple as that. Also, check out some of our sponsors. Discount codes in the video description below. You can check out 15% off of Battle Foam with Crabbok VIP as your discount code. Also, for playmats and accessories over at Game Toppers, use Crabbok 15 as your discount code over there, and that'll save you on some amazing mats. We've been previewing those lately. Some really cool stuff. Also lots of accessories for their awesome table toppers that are already at an incredible price. Let's go ahead and start talking about the beginning. We had Wave 1 that launched shortly after the core sets first dropped. The beginning of Armada. Truly an excellent time. Truly an excellent time. This one was great. Before the core set even launched, before Wave 1 launched, I remember like the core set coming out, the proper Wave 1 stuff wasn't out the same day, at least for me here in Orlando, and I remember picking up a second core set so this way I could play more. I think I ended up picking 3 core sets up by the time I kind of stopped and said, okay, that's enough. It was a lot of core sets that I was buying because I wanted to play bigger and bigger games, bigger and badder. And back then also, the game was only 300 points. You guys remember this? If you guys have been playing for a while, a tournament game, a standardized game was only 300 points. It wasn't until shortly after this announced Wave 2 to finally come out that that the game ended up becoming 400 points. This was an interesting time because Wave 2 released not long after Wave 1. I remember playing in my first tournament for Star Wars Armada. This was right before Wave 2, but it was a Wave 2 pre-release tournament where you could win a Star Destroyer, win a Mon Calamari Cruiser, win a Raider or a Squadron Pack, or an MC-30. And I placed second in 2 different tournaments, and I ended up, I think the same guy won both, and I came placed second in both, and I didn't play him in either tournament. But I ended up getting a Star Destroyer and an MC-80 pretty early. And so after Wave 2, I remember it feeling like a huge gap of time because I had won these on the heels, like right after Wave 1 came out. So I remember feeling like I had a whole year to wait until any new big ships or anything major came out. Once Wave 2 eventually came out, and I only had to pick up a couple of things because I already had some of the stuff, but I always bought 2 of everything at the time anyway. Honestly, it was a groovy time to be playing the game. I was completely in love with it, and this is one of those times where I went super in love. And then I remember around the time of Wave 3, when they finally announced Wave 3, it was a big delay. I think a reason for this delay is that the Super Star Destroyer was supposed to have come out around this time, and there were tons of delays with getting it. It was, everybody talks about how much of a nightmare it was to actually get this thing produced because it was too big and get it manufactured and shipped, and it went through a lot of revisions and all of this stuff. I'd love for the true Hollywood story of the real story that went behind the Super Star Destroyer, because I know I've heard bits and pieces, but yeah, but Wave 3, I remember when Wave 3 was first announced, I remember waiting, it's been like a year with no news, and I remember I was one of these people that went around on the Fantasy Flight message boards saying Armada is truly dead. I was a naysayer, I was a doom and gloom. I went through a phase, and I was like, this, a whole year, and this is what we get? Like, yeah, it's cool to have these little flotillas, but they're not going to change the game all that much. And they ended up changing the game in a significant way, but it wasn't the big flashy thing that I was waiting for. But to my eventual surprise, they also announced Wave 4 to launch at the exact same day as Wave 3. So it was a very interesting time. And so once they announced this, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Not just cool, really cool. And like, I felt like I was like, oh, okay. I think I made, if you guys have been following this stuff, I know every once in a while some folks will find some old clip from the old Fantasy Flight forums of me saying that Armada was truly dead. What they don't show you is my public apology when I realized the error of my ways, because I definitely made one, and I was like, I was wrong. I spoke in haste and speaking from passion and fear and blah, blah, blah. And I stand corrected. This is a really cool wave, and I'm very happy. I've had to eat my words on numerous occasions, because I've definitely been there and spoken with passion a lot of times in the history of this game. After this point, I feel like Armada was getting a little bit more regular releases. Wave 5 came out, and with it, my favorite ship of all time, the Architans. I didn't even know I was going to love the Architans as much as I ended up loving the Architans. Also, Wave 5 was a really proper full wave. Wave 3 didn't feel like a full wave. Wave 4 didn't feel like a full wave, but Wave 3 and 4 coming out on the same day still kind of felt like a full wave. Wave 5 gave us 2 new squadron packs and 2 new ships, so it felt a little bit more like a full wave, and it was definitely groovy, gave us some cool stuff for sure. Now, Wave 6 was an interesting wave. Not as much of a full wave as we had kind of been getting up to this point. But we did get the Hammerheads and a 2-ship pack, which, from what I understand, if the game was going to still continue to go, they would have been starting to do more of that style of design. I'm not sure why they didn't end up doing that with the Clone Wars for things like the Pelta. I think they should have. It would have been easier to get more stuff on the shelf and a bit easier on retailers. A lot of little things that were starting to change around this time, and it was a cool thing to see the 2 Hammerheads in one pack. And then the Quasar was a massive carrier force for the Empire. It was a pretty impactful wave. I think a stronger expansion, or stronger wave for the Empire overall. But still a really good wave. Wave 7, tremendous wave. This one hits me especially hard because this is one of those waves that I got very, very early from Fantasy Flight. These showed up at my door one day, and I didn't know that they were coming. But we had talked a little bit about doing reviews and stuff like that, but I didn't have confirmation of what was coming, when it was coming, or whatever. And the funniest story is, I had my friend Sean over, and we were going to play Armada this night. And we were setting up to play Armada. We were going to film a battle report. And then all of a sudden, my doorbell rings, and I go, and I open, and I see a box, and it says it's from Asmodee. And I'm like, what? I'm like, hey, Sean, look at this. And we open it up, and we're like, and I open it up, I'm like, oh my God. And it's strange for one of the most, I get chills thinking about it, because I was like, this, to frame it a little bit better, these hadn't even been fully spoiled. All we knew was, what the wave was going to be, and I think we had seen, maybe 1 or 2 spoiler cards from this wave. There was many upgrade cards that hadn't been spoiled, many titles, a lot of stuff from this wave hadn't been spoiled yet, and all of a sudden here it is at my door. And that was a really cool feeling because it took me back to when I first got into tabletop gaming. I first started playing X-Wing and stuff like that. I didn't know, I wasn't following all the news, so I would buy something and have no idea what was in the box and open it up and be excited. But then once I started paying attention to the news and started content creation and all that other stuff, I had to know what was in the box before I bought it. So this was the only time I think I ever opened a box not having any idea really what was inside it, and I was blown away. So I got some very early exclusives on this. We changed up our lists on the spot, filmed a battle report here, and it was those unboxings. And I had a lot of tragic stuff in my life happen like the very same night, and so this was like a really welcome breath of fresh air and excitement that really helped get me through a very tough time in my life. So strange that those two things happened in the same day, but it was this was a very impactful wave for me. Wave 8, I didn't have the same picture. I had to Photoshop it a little bit. It wasn't a standard picture for Wave 8. Wave 8 was exciting for a couple of reasons. This was like new ships that we hadn't really seen before. Like I had never seen an Onager before. I think I had one comic book appearance before this. And the Starhawk was in the Aftermath trilogy. It was there for the writing of the Battle of Jakku, but we had never seen it. There had been mock-ups. It had been described as like a hatchet-like ship. It had been expected to look a little bit like a Nebulon, but made from parts of old Star Destroyers. I was a big fan of the literature at the time. I was a big fan of reading about the Starhawk, and I was so excited to see this when it was announced. And Wave 8 was one of those waves that works really good for casual games, but I don't think it was a strong wave for the competitive scene because it kind of steered games towards towards a way that could have been unfun for people and stuff. So I think if you're approaching the ships from Wave 8 from a hey, let's play a friendly game, Onagers, you can kind of sit back and just, kill people from, without any risk to you, start taking shots on round one. Starhawks, you can sit in the corner and just farm objective points and not even play the game. Like they both gave you a way to try to win competitively without actually really playing the game for the fun of the game. And that's not the way to run Wave 8. I think if you're going to run Wave 8, you got to play the game, have some fun, just dive right into it. Yeah, the Onager can shoot farther away, but you know what? Still, don't keep it in the corner. Fly it, right at your opponents too. Have some fun with it. Give them a chance to actually kill it because it's still a decent ship if you're flying it that way. And the Starhawk, you got to dive it straight into battle. Don't try to keep people from engaging it. It can sometimes die. It's still hard to kill it, even without running a gate on there. It's still a cool ship, and it's so a very, very great wave for casual gaming, less great wave for competitive gaming. And then a truly epic moment. I remember the day when they announced the Clone Wars for Star Wars Armada. This would have been like, what, Wave 9? It didn't call it that at this point. It was just Armada the Clone Wars wave. This was just a day that we had been talking about. I wrote a song begging Fantasy Flight to do Armada the Clone Wars, because when they announced the Clone Wars for Star Wars Legion and they announced the Clone Wars for X-Wing, they didn't announce the Clone Wars for Armada. And I remember asking, hey, I was at that FFG in-flight brief at Gen Con when they used to do them there. I remember asking, you guys forgot one of your games, and they were just like, yeah, we didn't mention that, did we? And so I kept the pressure on, and eventually the day came. I was at Star Wars Celebration working the con in Chicago, and when they announced this, and it was a very happy moment. Nobody knew. It was a really well kept secret, and it was amazing. And it wasn't even announced with that much fanfare. But then when this started getting closer, I was able to do some interviews and a lot of publicity for it, and I was through the moon. And then our final wave, which honestly was a really it was a good loaded wave. It gave the Clone Wars a couple of extra ships, 2 extra ships each. It gave us the Venator, which of course, probably most beloved ship in all of Star Wars Armada right now, I would say. Probably most in-demand ship if you've got one of these still in the box. It's probably worth a couple of $1 million. So no, kidding. But yeah, honestly, really solid wave. And it's only a shame we didn't get like one more big-sized wave. Like if we had gotten another wave that had, you know, 2 more ships per faction and maybe another squadron pack per faction, it would like just rounded out the Clone Wars, and it would have been a better stopping point. And so like this was kind of where the production ended. Now there was some additional releases that I hadn't talked about with all of this, right? There were rapid reinforcements that Atomic Mass Games had released after that last wave, gave us a little bit of extra content. There were, of course, the campaign expansion packs. There was the Super Star Destroyer. And there were other things like Suma of all things, and other little kind of smaller supplementary releases, each of which added to the game in their own way. So, kind of running through the timeline, the question is now, what was really the golden age? That's probably going to differ for a lot of different people, but for me, it was probably indisputably Wave 7. I think this represents Armada at its height. Wave 7 was a very solid wave. This also came after we've seen some important errata. There were changes made that basically stopped you from using lifeboats. That's like kind of nerfed Riken infinite zombie stuff a little bit. Not infinite, but like there was some. Armada was a well enough designed game that didn't really need very much errata. It was rare that we would get like patches or points updates or errata or anything like that, because again, the game was just solid. It was designed really well. And but we did get one big push not too long before Wave 7 had come out, that really kind of was a big balance changer and kind of fixed some things that were a little out of whack. Then we get Wave 7, tremendous wave, brought out Grand Admiral Thrawn. Of all of the... Back when the days when they used to let world champions design cards, Grand Admiral Thrawn was like the one that really hit the mark exactly right, whereas some of the other ones ended up being a little too strong, right? But this was a beautiful point in time for the game. And it came also before Wave 8 came, and then really shifted metas into certain directions that weren't as healthy for the fun factor of players. I feel like there's a reason too. Like I've heard of communities that play rule sets that kind of stop here, as if the game had ended at Wave 7, and Wave 7 was the last wave, and they don't play with anything that came out after this. I've heard of communities that would do that. And I can understand why. To me, Wave 7 was the golden age of Armada. I think you had a lot of great shit. And to be fair, the stuff that came out after this, for the Empire and Rebellion, don't really have to get used that much. You can, you can have a really thriving meta without any of the Wave 8 ships. This does mean, though, however, that you wouldn't have the Clone Wars. So you might, some people might say, okay, Clone Wars is fine, just not Wave 8. I know some people feel that way. I don't personally have as big of a problem with Wave 8 because, again, I don't usually play where I must win. I usually don't play that heavily competitively. If I'm going to run these ships, I usually run them in a kind of a slightly suboptimal configuration in hopes of actually taking them into combat and fighting and slugging it out with my opponents and giving them a good, solid chance to destroy my ships, as opposed to playing it safe and just trying to win. Because that's the kind of way I like to roll. And in that mindset, I think these ships work great. But if you are trying to place first in a significant tournament, these ships kind of don't work that well in a healthy meta for that type of environment, just because they can give you kind of a, I've seen a lot of games where somebody will just play in the corner and not do too well and not really engage, not make the game fun. And I feel like at Wave 7, it was the peak of the fun factor in the game. Of course, I was overjoyed when the Clone Wars came out. This was a tough choice, because Clone Wars being announced, coming out, and then they announced that other wave for the Clone Wars was coming too. It was really, really great. And we were kind of flying high, thinking Armada, and like Armada had started to slow down a little bit, and we're like, we got new factions now. We're going to get new expansions every year. We're going to be getting regular expansions for a while to catch the Clone Wars up, and then, then 2020 happened, and, things shifted, production ended, and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. So that's why, another reason why I go back in time to this wave's launch. Absolute golden age. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a different point that was your favorite? No wrong answers here. I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments section below. You can also jump in our Discord, keep the discussion going there. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all. And always wash your socks.